Hey, go.
Okay, we'll open the meeting of the Carver Townwide Budget Sustainability Study for September 10th at 7:03. If we could please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Meeting will be recorded tonight by Area 58. Thank you. I don't see anybody in the public. Mr. Milnowski, please join us. Meg's up here too, so come on up.
I'm going to be the peanut gallery for us. No, get up here.
And Brad, same thing.
You gotta sit up front.
Yeah, I do.
Well, we're going to call for the town administrator update.
And I hear it first on the agenda. It's on the play.
Do we have an update?
You have to be up here.
I always have an update.
Of course you do.
All right, update. Currently, right now, finance director and I were working on putting together our forecast for the FY20 budget. I'm sorry, FY21 budget. We hope to get that out by early October, if not the end of the month, to see how that plays into our forecast. I do anticipate that this year we are going to do a little bit better than we did last year as far as the percent increase. I think the percent increase last year was 2.4%, and I think we're going to come in a little bit higher than that. We don't have that exact number yet because we're still working through a few different scenarios, and that also depends upon how some of our solar projects come online. The Board of Selectmen has approved, I think some number somewhere around $700,000 in new solar projects this year. We hope to have a few more coming in as well. Just because we approve a solar tax agreement doesn't mean that money comes in right away, because they don't start making the payments until the projects are actually online and connected. But, you know, in the pipeline, that's a good amount of new growth coming on top of some other activities that are happening in the town. So that's kind of where we stand. We are going to be re-looking a little bit at some of our financial office organization and see how that plays out. A few weeks ago, we had a meeting with our assessing consultant with the chairman and Steve Pratt, and got some feedback on some staffing structure changes that they think would better serve the town, that we're going to be taking a look at as well. Other than that, we have the school elementary project is wrapping up, and we hope to get final reimbursement and close that out with MSBA later on this year to the beginning of the first quarter of next year, and close out probably over $1 million of funds that we will be recommending get transferred to the police station project. The police station project is slated to go out to bid at the end of September. All of the drawings have been finalized, and that's moving along. And our groundbreaking for the new King property recreation complex started a couple weeks ago, and that project is in full swing right now, hoping to get the playgrounds up and running in the month of October. Anything else, Meg, that I missed? No. Brad, is there anything from your standpoint?
Nope. I think what they have till November 11th for the fields at the elementary school.
Yep.
So that work should be going along.
Other than that, things are going well.
Mr. Chairman, since this is being recorded on Area 58, maybe just a reminder from the town administrator how the breakdown of this new money from the solar projects is. It's not all $700,000 into our operation budget.
Very good point. I left out that crucial detail. Our financial policies were modified, and because the tax revenue that comes in from solar projects is considered personal property, personal property depreciates over time. If this was a straight investment, it would depreciate over whatever the life cycle is. However, because we negotiate these tax agreements for a 20-year period, we take an average payment over those 20 years and extend it out those 20 years. But at the end of those 20 years, those payments do stop. And at that time, who knows what the technology is going to be then? Who knows if they're going to repower? We don't know. So the challenge has always been that you need to treat this as one-time money, because it is personal property coming in that has a definitive lifespan. With that, those funds are broken out into 3 categories. The first category, the first third of the funds, actually offsets capital and debt stabilization funds that were paid out of tax revenue, which in essence means a third of the funds actually do go into the operating base. So a third of the funds will go into the operating base through the capital and debt stabilization offsets. The next third is for unfunded liability. That includes pension and OPEB. Again, these are one-time monies that will be going into that. The third third, or the last third, is going to be going into a stabilization fund to be set up for the reconstruction and or major modification of the middle high school when that project comes due. The goal is to try to set funding up for that ahead of time so that you're reducing or eliminating the need for a tax override when that facility meets its useful life, which is in 20 years based upon SBA's recommendation. Just to give you an idea, our elementary school all in was about $48 million, call it $50 million. Any type of middle high school that's being built these days is $150 million. The investment from MSBA is the same, which in essence means that your tax rate is not going to go up triple, it goes up more than that because SBA gives you a certain dollar amount, up to a certain dollar amount that they'll pay. That's why we're looking at a little planning ahead of time to set up a fund to offset some of that additional burden so that we don't get into an 8-year debate about when the building needs to be built. We build it when it needs to be built and we have funding set aside for that. So again, of the solar money that comes in, a third will be going into operational revenue and the other 2/3 will be going into long-term solutions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Selectman.
My pleasure.
I knew that's what they were doing with it. It was a great idea, but I'm glad you said to bring it up for the video. I also want to thank Michael for the hard work that he's done on getting the volunteer work that's being done at the King property. I understand that Bob is over there volunteering that machine in his time.
Well, we have certain people that are volunteering stuff. We have hired Bob to do some of the work because it's multiple weeks.
Right.
That's there, but we do have a reduced rate for that we could never touch if we went up to bid. He's basically doing their cost.
Yep.
And we've had other people come in and donate material. Gil Lopes donated 7 loads of washed gravel for all the drainage system. And we've had other truckers come in and donate their time, including your truly chairman there, who changed the schedule around to come in because we tried to get some material out there by the end of the day, and he helped out. And we're continuing to get people to donate for that project to keep that in budget. And what we're trying to do is upgrade some of the elements of that through these savings.
How many loads of stone?
7 truckloads.
So, and you're looking at like $12 a ton for that kind of, in fact, the wash might be a little bit higher. So when you get a donation like that and there's 200 tons sitting on the tarmac out there, it's a sizable amount of money. So, it's not like he's calling in his buddies and just send us a bill for whatever you want. This takes a lot to get these companies to donate this material. It's another thing to it's no big deal to truck a load for free. You go from here up the street and back, big deal, you burn 10 gallons of fuel. That's nothing. But when you start bringing in material at that kind of a cost, and a washed stone there's washed and there's twice washed, and it gets extraordinarily expensive the more you start. And then it depends on where it's coming from. So I just wanted to make mention. Thank you. Let's do the minutes from the, if we can, real quick before we break into Steve. Let's get the minutes from this older meeting out of the way. This is the minutes from the June 27th, 2019. I sent them in an email as well as you have them in front of you. Anything that we missed? Any changes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. Any further discussion? Everything okay? Everybody else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're good.
Boyd
I'm-
was not there.
Oh, well, if you weren't there, you can't vote.
Right, myself too.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Okay, just letting you know. That needs to be done. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay. You sure?
we're real easy here, James. What do you think, we follow like Robert's rules and stuff? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
All right. Picking up where we left off with Mr. Pratt. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, so what does FVAC stand for? Anyone? All right. Meg, you can't say.
Didn't know we were going to have a quiz.
Well, it was he gave me the floor, so. No, I know there was a lot to digest on the 27th. I hope over the last couple of months, somebody might have taken a look at a few of the things. A lot of the things that I got a chance to look at over the last couple of months is to kind of reflect upon stuff that I've been doing for a better part of 30 years. I've made presentations to the select board, previously similar to this. But I think the thing that struck me more importantly was the amount of new growth that Carver actually has had over the last 20 years. One of the exhibits that was on the new growth exhibit, it struck me that while we've all heard and we've all talked about, anybody who's been here for more than 10 years, the whole N-Star transformer that came in the middle of the night and generated $700,000 to the fiscal 2011 tax levy. But during that time, even though it was a $37 million transformer, that's really small compared to what we've actually done over the last 20 years. We've actually created almost $340 million of new growth in the last 20 years. 180 million of residential and 160 million of commercial, industrial, and personal property. And a big part of that is personal property. I mean, that's one of the things that struck me, and we didn't get into a lot of the weeds in that, but at 11% of our tax levy, personal property is 11% of our total tax levy. We're the 19th highest in the state as far as personal property is concerned as being part of a tax levy. And you figure there's 351 cities and towns. How could Carver have so much personal property versus other communities, even cities? But again, it's the relative percentage to the total tax levy. And it's because of all of the Eversource new growth. And we'll have more new growth with the solar panels that are now going to be in the personal property. So one of the things that struck me is that, we've had all this great personal property new growth. Personal property is the best kind of increase to your tax levy. It doesn't require, police, fire, doesn't send any kids to schools. It's not a residential. And so it's great, but the problem is it has a tail. And the tail to it is that personal property has a useful life, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, or what have you. And when that personal property is no longer useful and the business owner takes that out of use, he stops paying taxes on it. Well, the offshoot of that is it doesn't come out of the tax levy. It's not an excise tax like your car. You go get rid of your car, town doesn't collect an excise tax. But once it's in the tax levy, it's in the tax levy. It doesn't come out. The only way to get it out is through an underride. And underride's a dirty 9-letter word. And so we don't use it that often, but that's really truly the only way to get something out of the tax levy. You know, debt exclusions come in, and then when they're done, they leave. So personal property is good. It helps grow the tax levy. And one of my exhibits, you know, I showed you that 53% of our current tax levy, the $26 million tax levy, is all because of the new growth since Proposition 2.5 came in 1982. That's been the reason why we've had it grown. It's not because our $3 million tax levy that existed in fiscal '92 grew. It grew by 2.5%. That's all it can grow. And it's not like we have, you know, we've done a lot of debt exclusions over the years. You know, we build schools every 30 years. You know, that's our standard MO. So the good news is for all of us here, the likelihood of us seeing another whole entire school building being built is probably pretty remote. But the bottom line is that the tax levy keeps growing. And when I looked at the different components of what makes the tax levy grow, you know, I saw the personal property, and then, you know, maybe it was eye-opening to some about the override that we passed in fiscal '87 of $1.6 million, that it's now, you know, over $3.3 million, because that gets to grow by 2.5% every year. So when you look at how we've grown, I think we've done it the right way. I'll be honest with you. I mean, you know, 20 years ago, I was a big advocate for a single tax rate. I thought we needed to bring more commercial business in this town in order to offset the residential growth that had occurred during the mostly 80s, but 70s and 80s. I thought we needed to have that balance. But the changes that occurred with the cranberry evaluations by the Farmland Valuation Advisory Commission, FEAC, they changed it dramatically. They dropped values by almost 88%. Over the course of 3 years. And that, again, shifted that tax levy to the rest of the taxpayers, commercial, industrial, you know, personal property, residential. But then also, too, the introduction of the personal property and being such a big piece of our thing. When it comes to Eversource, it's great. It grows the tax levy. But right away, they take 28 to 30% out because they have accumulated reserve. They're allowed to, as part of the infrastructure, to set aside monies. And they don't just do it for Carver, they do it for every one of the cities and towns that they do business in. They set aside a reserve percentage to maintain infrastructure. So we get to put in the case of 2011, you know, $690,000 into the tax levy, but right away, they subtracted $200,000. They didn't pay the town $690, they only paid them $490. Well, the rest of us had to pay the other $200. And so it's great that our levy grows. It's a great way, and I've kind of used this a couple of times, and if I said it before, you know, I consider assessed values the fuel, and the tax levy is the engine. So the more we can do to increase our assessed values, whether it's be through primarily through new growth, that's what's going to cause the tax levy to go up. And as I said, 20 years ago, I was a big advocate of a single tax rate, but now looking at all these other factors, personal property, the change in the chapter land values, just the dynamics of everything that causes the shifting of taxes without us even doing anything, I'm a big advocate of increasing keeping the CIP split tax rate, and perhaps even increasing it, because over 20 years, the past 20 years, had we had a straight tax rate, we've actually had a lower tax levy, because we've actually had $160 million of new growth. If you had taxed that at the lower tax rate, your tax levy wouldn't have grown, because we only had $180 million of residential. And when you look at the differential between commercial and tax, it's not just, everybody kind of looks at it and say, oh, well, it's the factor that the select board sets at the tax rate hearing. That's the factor off the straight rate. Compare the commercial rate to the residential rate. This year, it's like 160% difference. on 1.45. So you think about all the new growth that we would have had if we had been taxing it at 45% less, in the real 1 factor instead of a 45 factor or anything like that. And I think that's something to look forward. And you can't know from year to year whether or not you should have a higher commercial, because you always use the prior year tax rate to establish what the new growth you add to the tax levy. So it'd be like you have to have a crystal ball. How much new growth are we going to have in this year? Oh, we're going to have 10 times more residential. Oh, let's go to a single tax rate, that prior year. So you can't do that. So what you got to do is look back at history and look and prospectively at things that are going on with the solar farms that Mike only know about. We know those are coming. So it kind of, hopefully if one of the things we come out of this is if the whole idea is sustainability, what do we do to sustain our tax levy? And more importantly, what do we do to help maybe make that, put a little more fuel in the tank so that the engine can go run a little bit better. It can run a little bit better for the town, can run a little better for the schools, the police, the fire. So everybody gets to run a little bit better. And clearly, we've had new growth in commercial. We've had new growth in industrial. So the split tax rate hasn't hurt our new growth. We have our new growth. And we don't have a boom in residential. We're building, 10, 15 homes a year. It's not like we're building hundreds of homes every year because we have a low tax rate. Again, it comes down to where we are relative to other communities, where we are relative to our own income levels here, and what we can afford versus, what other communities are. So you have to put it in the comparison. When you do look at that, whether you're looking at just the Plymouth County analysis or you look at the state level, both of those are going to tell you that Carver is being taxed where they should be relative to their income, relative to their equalized value, and more importantly, the determinant as to what the state aid gets, because those are your two big factors, income and value. That's what Chapter 70 runs off of. That's what general aid runs off of. There's other factors like municipal revenue growth factor that plays into it, a minor piece, but I can tell you we got hurt probably 5-6 years ago when the whole Landstar thing came in, because we all of a sudden had this huge growth of revenue that we didn't do anything. We didn't build anything. We didn't have a big commercial property come in town. They had a transformer come in town, and and then they had other projects that came in and added even more personal property. So I think the things that I take from it is that you got to look at it in a very holistic manner, I think, as opposed to looking at pieces. Don't look at just the tax rate. Don't look at just new growth. You have to look holistically at everything that is going on, because each one gives you like little breadcrumbs as to where we need to go. And I hope one of the things that it does is that it gives everybody a little bit broader understanding of where Carver's been, and so we can figure out where we need to go. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. I'm here tonight to, try to answer some questions. I don't know if we, can talk about some things that we've, kind of discovered, if that's the right word for it. I have some other thoughts and ideas, and maybe the select board can, kind of give their thoughts to some ideas that, we can throw around just to, see where we want to go forward with this. Because it's great to have all this information, but if you don't do anything with it, then, it's 77 pages of, my last 30 years looking at municipal finance in the town of Carver. So, take it for what it is. I'll turn it back to you, Alan.
I also didn't want this study to come off as being, and I said this in the very beginning at the last meeting, I didn't want this to come off as being an attack to the school or the school budget. The school budget is what it is. We're trying to find ways to make the school budget work as well as the town budget work with the infrastructure changes that are being made and so forth and so on. There's a lot of new growth coming into town. There's something going on with Makepeace and Tohonet. 350 houses? Is that what the potential is down there? 325?
Yeah, I don't think they fought anything. I mean, they can build a lot more than that in the land
Well,
of
it's,
Carver.
yeah, it's all, and you were saying that's been on the, in the works for
Well,
a
that got
long
approved by
time.
Wareham 15 years ago, and quite honestly, 80 Makepeace was just like any other developer, when the real estate market, kind of collapsed in 2007, 2008, they were like, well, we're not going to build the homes because they just lost 30% in value. So they're positioning themselves, and if you look at one of the graphics that I have in there, it shows you that inverted bell curve, from 2007 to 2019. We're actually almost back to, single-family home values as where they were at the peak of 2007. But let's face it, regrettably, anybody who bought homes in Carver in 2004, 2005, 2006, they're likely, just starting to get out from underwater. I mean, that's the reality of it, and that's so those people aren't leaving. They've been diligently paying their mortgages in hopes that they're going to get on the upside of it. So, but Tenet is. I know there's a part of it being built, and my understanding was about 350 homes were in Carver and 400 or so were in Wareham. I think the bulk were in Wareham, and then there were another few hundred that were in Plymouth. And that by itself can put pressure on Carver. I mean, that by itself put pressure on Carver. But if you remember from the night, one of the shots I showed you is that right now we've got 3,400 non-manufactured housing residential units in Carver. We have under 1,600 students in schools, which means that we have about 0.5 students per those 3,400 residential homes. Go back 20 years ago, we had 0.8. So we don't have to build another home in this town. If we ever go back to that 0.8, all of a sudden Brad's got 2,400 kids he's got to worry about, more, or maybe even more than that. So 2,600. So now all of a sudden, and you don't get any new tax revenue, except the money coming from Chapter 70. And we know Chapter 70 is not going to fund, 50 cents on the dollar. Is that a fair assessment?
There's a big gap that we have to close before we ever got additional Chapter 70 money.
Right. Well, that's the other thing too. There's always the lag. I mean, remember when we went full.
Would you let Brad explain that piece, because I think that's an important component for everyone to know.
Yeah, I was going to ask that as soon as Steve
the
was.
lag part.
Yeah, so I'm a big visual guy, so it's easier to show you on an actual map, but quickly I'll try to explain it. Right now what happens is we are in a hold harmless, so our actual money from the state for Chapter 70 has slightly increased, even though our enrollment has decreased, because a lot of small school districts are in the same position we're in. We've lost enrollment. So the state put in this hold harmless provision that says you will not lose Chapter 70 funding, even if your enrollment drops. So what's happened is the state has been giving us small increases, so the gator's mouth is going like this. But realistically, if they were to follow the actual Chapter 70 formula without hold harmless, we would have fallen off. But because they haven't, this has just grown and grown and grown, the difference from what we actually should be receiving to what we receive. So what happens is, as students, if we got another 50 kids in, right, this would go closed, but we actually wouldn't see another dollar until we hit here, and then we go over it. So there's a gap that it's $1.7 million. There's not an amount of kids you can put on it, because depending on if they're economically disadvantaged, there's no hard definitive number.
So you're saying we have to eat another $1.7 million before Chapter 70 sees a penny?
Correct.
Yeah, you got to absorb that.
Correct.
And that's not inconsistent. Even go back 12 years ago, when Carver elected to go from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten, the state didn't reimburse her for I think it was 1 or 2 years.
Yeah,
it was a while before that. And even then, I will go back 25 years ago when Ed Reform Act of '93 was passed and fiscal '94. We were floundering. I mean, we were like in deep, right, Pat? We were in deep trouble in the early '90s.
Pat, you're welcome to come. I'm sorry. You're welcome to come up.
Before Ed Reform, yeah.
Yeah, before Ed Reform, I mean, we were growing exponentially in students. And, because I ran the basketball program during that time, so I know how many 2nd through 6th grade boys were going to go. I could hopefully get at least 50 per grade, because we had 100 boys almost. We had 200 kids per grade, during that time. And, you know, but we weren't getting anything. I mean, because we were still part of Plymouth Carver, you know, for the high school part of it, and ed reform hadn't kicked in, and we couldn't do anything as a town because we'd already done the override to open up the high school, we had already done the debt exclusion to build the high school, and then the elementary school was just like, you know, crumbs, probably the best word for it, that's what we had left, because we weren't getting anything from the state. State aid, Chapter 70 didn't exist, so we were getting the old formula, and we just weren't there. It was very difficult times. I mean, from being on the finance committee during that period, and I mean, I know Mark was on there with me at that point too, with Dan Ryan, and you know, there was a bunch of us on there, Dan Brazel. I mean, there was a whole cast of characters, and it was tough. It was tough for the select board, and it was tough for the town. But I mean, we didn't have the money. I mean, there was no way to create the money. You know, we couldn't do another override at that point, even if we wanted to. So yeah, it's a huge challenge, because you know, you look at, I mean, you think about it, more than half the homes in town, more than half, are not sending students to our schools.
That's right.
And the fear is it turns over within 3 years.
Well,
That's the biggest, like, that's our fear on the school side, because if that happens, then you see new families move in and you get grade levels of 160 rather than the 120. Then we have to hire a teacher for that grade level, 2 teachers at the elementary in grades K through 5 until they hit the middle high school, and it's just, you don't want bubbles hurt you in terms of staffing for elementary.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, with a gated mouth like this, and it's just going to do this, and you're not going to get the revenue.
Well, we go back to the other problem we discussed, and we talked about this on the phone. Mark has a big house, I have a big house. They're empty nests now.
Yeah.
Andy's got a big place, and no kids. So we sell these houses, and the new family moves in. I've got 5 bedrooms. Mark's got 4 bedrooms. You know, there's 5 kids in the family all of a sudden, and yet the tax revenue to the town is what I was paying. But now there's 5 new kids impacting the town.
And we didn't build
without one dime. We didn't build a house.
No.
And if we stayed in town, we ended up over in maybe one of the parks or something, or we left. So that's another thing that's impactful on what's going on. So it's really going to need to be watched, and we're trying to find solutions that we want. The whole purpose of this study is to come up with an idea or a series of ideas that will, how do you say it, hurt less, I guess, than trying to stop a massive hemorrhage when it happens. I'd rather put some Band-Aids on the small cuts and find ways to fix those than to wait until we need tourniquets and when this drastic stuff has to happen. Because then you get into the whacked out system in this state where if you try to, God forbid, lay off someone to save the revenue, you got to lay off 3 because you got to pay the unemployment, you got to, so there's no, to save $1, you got to save 3. Because you got to put 2 of it back into saving the $1. So it just, and people don't understand that. I know I didn't until Steve brought it up. I was shocked. So we're trying to find ways to make it work, and I really want to emphasize that we're not trying to find ways to make it work on the back of the school budget. That's not our intent at all. Everybody's going to need to get real, and I think that's the purpose of this committee.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I know one of the things the state wants to do is, you know, they're talking, and I emphasized the word talk, of Chapter 70 reform. I think the problem is, and one of the exhibits I did was, you know, where's the income and where's the value and where's the population in the state? And if you look at, you know, the counties to the north, you know, they're going to drive whatever they, and those are the wealthier communities. And they're not going to do anything, those legislators are not going to do anything to negatively affect their constituents. Because no matter what, no matter how much income, your average income is, no matter how much your average value home is, the state's still giving minimum Chapter 70 monies to everybody.
Right.
They're not gonna impact the wealthier communities more, and they're the ones in the better position to do overrides and to do other ad fees and things like that, because they have the income to support it. And that's not true for, Worcester to the west and Bristol, Plymouth to the south.
But even the wealthier communities still don't want to go from having a house that's valued at $1.5 million and they're paying $22,000 a year in property taxes. They still don't want to go to $28,000 a year in property.
Why
They're
not?
not throwing the money away.
Why not? Because if you go and look at a lot of those communities, a lot of those communities don't have all of the students going to their schools.
No.
They're
You
going
get
to
up at-
private schools.
They're going to the private schools.
So they're going outside of their school district, which is why a Newton North can build a $240 million high school.
Well, look what Sharon just did,
I mean, we're not gonna build a
$1,600 per
We're not going to
house.
build a $240 million high school in Carver. Could be nice, but we're not going to do it. Brad probably have no hair left after that would happen. But I mean, but again, that's the problem with Chapter 70. I mean, we're 25 years into it, and it was intended initially to try to equalize the educational opportunities for all students in the Commonwealth by providing some formula that would try to balance it out, take in local revenues and state revenues that are basically being redistributed. And, and might have worked for the first 10 years, 15 years, might have been, but not in the last 10, I don't think. I mean, in my opinion, seeing, wealthier communities pass override after override, building these extremely large schools, which I realize is a debt exclusion, but it still speaks to the ability of the community to pay. And so whether or not it's a debt exclusion or an override, and you go into some of these other communities and see what the fees they're charging for sports programs, it would blow your mind. I mean, it would blow your mind. I know you see it.
It's across the board. It's
I know you
sports,
see it.
it's athlete.
Because it's not just a willingness to pay. It's not just an ability to pay, it's a willingness to pay.
Right.
Agreed. And a lot of these communities, they're willing to do it. They say, we got no problem with that. And
They prioritize the funds for those uses.
yeah, and
Is in Pembroke, the buses this year $600 a household or $600 a kid?
Could be, yeah. I don't know off.
There's a surcharge. Sharon's building a brand-new high school at $1,600 is the assessment per house. That's on top of your regular tax bill.
yeah, right. Yeah,
That's a
I think
ton
we
of
tried-
money.
I remember one year we tried charging for buses. It lasted for 1 year. It literally lasted.
And it was short money, wasn't it?
It was short money, but
it was only like
lasted-
$200
it
or
lasted
something
for
like
1
that.
year.
Yeah, and Carver's in a tough spot too, because you can't actually charge students free and reduced as well, and that number now takes up over almost 30% of our population.
Right.
So right off the bat, you can't charge 30% of your kids
Right.
the fee. So it just it narrows it down where it's not even worth your time, because
Yeah,
then.
it's not like we have neighborhood schools and we're a 10 square mile town.
Right, right.
We don't have neighborhood schools and we're 40 square miles. So that complicates our abilities, which is why, I know, in talking with Pat over the years, one of the reasons why Carver owns its own bus service rather than leasing it, because the cost per student would probably, be through the roof. I mean, because of the fact that we have 30 miles of road, in Carver. So, probably more now. I'm going back too many years, but, so that's the problem. I mean, we're just a big town with not a lot of population.
I actually ran that number too, because that was a question that someone had asked.
I did, I had a question as to
Yeah.
the leasing, subbing out the buses and stuff.
I have a list of comps that were done, larger districts, smaller districts, all across the board throughout the state. Our per bus per day average comes out to $373 per day.
Per bus.
Per bus, per day, yep.
We have how many buses?
We run 15 right now.
Does that include the vans?
No, the vans are totally
Vans are
separate. This is
separate,
just, because the vans, you
Leave
can't
town
really,
and, yeah,
it's a whole
yeah, a lot
different
harder,
breakdown,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this is just the hard cost per bus per day. The state average right now for FY '20 on contracts and municipal owned was $407 per day.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we're running, two buses, you know, I mean, the same bus is
yeah.
running 2 routes in the
Yep,
morning.
yep.
you
This
know,
is all in.
And then 2 at night.
Yep.
You know, and then you have your after schools and, you know, the
Yep.
sports and, you know, leaving town and.
Well, it's
you know.
not counting the sports events and stuff.
It's not counting sports events, but I left in there all of our extras that actually would be charged. So for example, like we were on a late bus. I leave that total cost in here, and it would actually drop it down, but if you went through a contractor, you're paying $50 an hour or more.
Well, that's what my question was
Exactly.
gonna be.
Yeah.
So this would drop even lower if I marked that out. But I thought overall this is a fair comp. And also too, what, for some reason, I disagree with this, and this is why I built it this way. The person who gave me this form said you should not include your capital cost for buses in there. I disagree with that. You have a cost of it.
Wait a minute,
They're not
if
free
you're
buses.
leasing it, you're paying the capital cost
Exactly,
in the lease.
So that is included in my 373 number. They told me not to, but I just disagree with
No,
that, so that's, yeah.
Can you forward me a copy of that? Just
Yep.
shoot it to me in an email?
You know, and, you know, of course, the other thing too is, you know, having our own buses obviously offers a huge flexibility. You know, whereas if you're leasing, you're at the mercy of the contract. You know, you got the contract that says you want this, and you want any flexibilities to it, you know, go back and renegotiate your contract.
No, my last school district, we did contract out, and we were in Western Mass, and we were paying for athletics. This is just athletics for extra fees, $40 per hour for the driver, and then $2.50 per mile. So it's a big, I mean, we're
Just
Yeah, that's something.
yeah.
Yeah, I was getting to that number.
going back.
I had to do it twice because I couldn't believe the number started.
Decades ago.
Do
Do you see the next number?
It was always advantageous
A day.
for Carver to run their own buses. I used to do a per pupil cost. And I used to put the capital cost in it. And when you did a per pupil cost over the years and compared it to the different,
Why 109?
whether there was those that ran their own buses.
That's
or
what I thought you
those
said.
That contracted.
I thought you said 109. I was like, where did you get 109?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, the analysis by the state isn't the best vehicle, pun intended, vehicle to use because it's so inconsistent between, you know, districts. You know, as far as because they're getting the data from the districts in the end of year reports,
go-
things like that.
Excuse me, let me go back to Brad.
Same over the years, but still, too, and some other costs that come in there, when you contract it out, when you use a contractor, for one thing, you're paying prevailing wage, and you don't have to when you have your own, and when you're your own employees, and when you're, you know, another hidden cost in a contractor is they have to pay unemployment in the summertime when their drivers aren't working. And municipalities don't. So you're picking up that cost too.
Sure. Yep, passing it through on the lease. Yep.
Brad, you're convinced that $1 million a year for us to have our own bus system is still the best way to do this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I bet you if you could do it in another analysis, which I think it'd probably be almost in, we could do it in our town, but I'm not sure you can give a comparative, is if you were to do it on a mileage basis. You know, you could do
Per
us.
square mile,
You
yeah.
could do it us, but to do it of other communities would be very difficult because they probably don't track it. But I bet you we still be economical, given the amount of miles that we know these buses have to, you know.
Well, then maintenance must have that number. What's the annual mileage put on these buses?
I can get it for you.
I didn't expect you to have it, I didn't believe me, that wasn't the reason I asked the
Keep
question.
that on my yellow sticky.
We track it. I have to report to get for my end of year report, so I do have it. I just,
I
yeah.
don't know if they all do that though.
I know, that's what I'm saying, I don't know if there's any comparative.
Well, we just bought a new bus this year, right?
Yeah.
And we got
Yeah.
2 for next year.
In queue,
Hopefully.
yeah, hopefully.
And then 1, and then 2, and then
town
1.
meeting.
What do we do with the old bus?
We're usually to get, the goal is to get 4 new ones every 3 years. If we stay in that cycle, we're in a good cycle.
What do we do with the old ones?
So,
Yep, surplus.
surplus. And we got away from selling them in the contract. We used to put them as a bid. We'd give them the old bus. We would take the credit on it. They were giving us $1,500 per bus, which that's crazy. So we were able to find, we've hooked up with a couple different school districts right now, giving us $35,000 to $4,000 to $4,500 depending on mileage, condition, all that stuff. So it didn't matter any of that to the contractor. It was just a flat $1,500, here you go, here's your credit. So we're able to scoop up money in terms of that to help offset the cost of the capital.
And how come we never charged anyone for buses?
I want to say you guys, they did.
1 year.
Oh, we did?
One,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
What happened to housing? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what was it?
They started building gallows out
I think it was,
front.
I want to say it was pre-ed reform.
Okay, 7th grade and up, I think if you were 2 miles or more away from the school, it was $200 a year. Like, then nobody,
I know that Pembroke's charging this year. I know that Middleborough went from owning to leasing and having an outside bus company, and it saved them a boodle of money.
There was more.
Now, that might flip around the other way. Maybe it was low bid, I don't know.
Right.
Driveways, it was.
I still think it's worthwhile to put it out for bid to see just what we get back for a number.
See, this is where I disagree with that, Alan, because that sets a bad precedent for your drivers, which worries me. We have a lack of drivers right now who can easily hop to Plymouth, first student has their contract. Where they make Carver, on our scale, let's say we pay our CDL drivers $21 an hour. They can go to first student tomorrow and make 27, 28 right off the bat. It's the benefit piece on our side that we're able to offer that they don't get going for first student that makes up that gap for them, and that's why they decide to stay. I just, from my seat, I would not recommend looking at that at all, just because I
charging for people to take
not only charging, I just mean looking for contract.
To contract it out, because you don't want to scare off the drivers.
I mean,
People here that,
And it will,
yeah,
exactly.
I can vouch, I mean, having, been on the finance committees in
You
the
could
80s,
drive.
early 90s, and we've looked at it multiple times.
Yeah.
You could
It
drive,
always
put your little bow
circled
tie on, you could be like Mr.
you
Rogers.
know, do it in-house.
If you're interested, we got openings.
$21 an hour.
I'm sorry.
Okay, my wife had the idea.
Bylaw does allow
That's right, I'm sorry.
part-time.
Do you have any idea how long that busload of kids at last would be behind the wheel? You wouldn't make it past the third stop.
I'm sure that you hear from the parents, though.
Oh, there'd be kids getting off at the third stop.
And on our end too, we've done a lot in terms of consolidating routes as much as possible. That's why we may only have 14 routes. I have to double check. We either went from 16 to 15 or 15 to 14. Because we did have a driver leave early last year, and we just reconsolidated based on availability that we had on other buses. So it's the first week of school. I always get the complaints of bus stops, but we've looked at trying to narrow them down, and cul-de-sacs are going to the top where the bus can meet them on the main road and whatnot. So I know everyone's not always thrilled about that, but we've tried to trim down hours and whatnot where we can. I know when we went from, and Pat, you didn't even know the year on this. What year did you guys go from 3 tiers down to 2 for busing?
Well, years ago, we had 4 tiers and half-day kindergarten.
Right.
We had an awful time trying to keep drivers under 40 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we went from 4-tier to 3-tier to 2-tier. You had to. And really, some of the drivers literally, they got their hours like cut in half because of that.
Right.
But then there's other things like late buses and sports runs and so forth. But we used to have 4 tiers. It was high school, middle school,
Right.
elementary, primary.
Don't forget, we had the Ben Ellis, run too.
Buses constantly on the road.
Yeah, I mean, before '07, when we were having half-day kindergarten, and you had, it's not half-day kindergarten, it's half AM, half PM.
Yeah.
So you got those buses just, they were always on the road.
Yeah.
Always.
And it's tough to get, as Brad will tell you too, it's tough to get drivers.
It's a hard job. I mean, you think about the hours on it.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, it's not friendly hours.
It's terrible. They're warming these buses up at 4:30 in the morning,
Right.
so that at 5:30 there can be screaming kids on the
The
bus.
first pickup's gotta be before 6:30.
6:30.
Yeah. And the last
And-
drop-off's gotta be, over regular buses, probably 4:30.
No, 3:30.
3:30,
Yeah,
even for the elementary?
Yeah, yep,
But then you have your late buses.
exactly.
which,
Yep, they're always out late.
So this 373, this is maintenance, this is fuel,
I can
this
send
is,
you that breakdown too.
but this is the whole ball of wax.
This is all in. all in.
I mean, he's trying to be an apples to
Yeah.
apples.
The other thing it doesn't
other
include is
communities.
the transportation facility cost that you originally paid, but I know, to me, that's a dead cost.
No, that's fine. It was just one of the things that I wanted to check off the list, that's all.
No, and once you get this, you may think it's not, you'll get a better view of what the market is.
Brad will send me that, and I'll email it all to everybody else.
I think
You'll
Steve made a
get
good
it.
point, trying to do a apples-to-apples comparison between communities that have the square mileage that we have. You know, it's hard to find that, 40.
Western part of the state.
Think so? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I
I
guess.
mean, I've said this before, Carver's in the wrong part of the state.
Yeah.
You know, we really should be out, west of Springfield.
Yeah, and you look back on it, and this is why state mechanisms of funding kind of hurt you again. Plymouth, I feel bad for Plymouth. Think about the area Plymouth covers. They don't get a dime back for reimbursement for transportation. Neither does Carver. But you look at some of these regional school districts that are on here, they're getting reimbursement for transportation. And it's like their square footage doesn't even come close to Carver's or Plymouth. And it's what their regional school, so they get the funding for it.
Right. And of course, that was the case with Carver and Plymouth when we were regionalized prior to '94. I mean, we were technically we acted like we were out of the region in '88 when we opened up the school, but in reality, the state kept us as a regional school district until ed reform. Because
5 years now.
yeah, because at that time the state had actually never disbanded a regional school district. They'd always added towns to a regional school district, and they subtracted towns like Pembroke, gets out of Silver Lake, but Halifax and Kingston and Plimpton still live there, so that's Silver Lake. Plymouth Carver was the first regional school district going back into the 50s that actually had to be disbanded by an act of legislature.
Well, at ed reform had an incentive in it to regionalize. And that was the year that Carver and Plymouth de-regionalized.
That's right.
And then they kept, for 5 years, they kept regional funding, like for transportation and so
Right.
forth, but then that got cut.
Right, yeah, I mean, I think at the time, if I remember correctly, in my conversation with Irwin Washburn, that I think Carver was going to lose $1 million if we regionalized, but Plymouth was going to lose like $2 million. So that was $3 million the state was giving to the Plymouth Carver School District to stay a regional school district. But the problem we had was that for every, one Carver student, there were 9 Plymouth students.
Yeah.
So unless you were a Rob Rooney, the likelihood you're playing sports in high school was pretty remote. So, those are the kind of things, and plus the Carver kids were on the bus, going to Plymouth North, they were on forever on the bus. You talk about, just staying within Carver and being on the bus for a while. They were, coming from Plymouth North and.
It just
One
wasn't,
thing, well, okay.
go ahead. I was just going to say, it just wasn't friendly to Carver. The money aside, it was something we had to do at the time.
Yeah, both towns had grown greatly in the 70s and 80s. Plymouth grew because of the nuclear power plant and, expansion of, their buildings, really started in the 60s, when Route 3 was opened up in the late 50s, and that's when growth started happening down here. Carver didn't grow because, quite honestly, there was nothing in Carver, except cranberry bogs. There was really anything, there really wasn't much here. The population here, hovered around 2,000-3,000 for years, and it was really only in the late 70s and 80s when they started selling the upland, that really where all this land became available. Before, I know my neighborhood, Fawn Estates, from the Cranberry Bogs all the way to South Meadow Road was considered upland. There were no homes there. It was all, in fact, when we first started looking down here, that part of South Meadow Road from Ward Street to the airport was dirt. And it wasn't even a good road. It went into Reverend Merritt's old front yard, almost in the front door.
But the transportation was a nightmare.
Right.
And if you were lucky enough to play a sport or do some type of extracurricular activity, and you had a parent had to pick you up, it was an hour trip, round trip. It was just didn't work.
And so Carver only really got to grow because there was really not much room on the upper South Shore. There were people who grew up there, like myself. I grew up in Rockland, and I couldn't find places to live there that was reasonable. I can come down here, and I know it sounds sad because I wish I had another $100,000 or $200,000 back then, but I bought an acre of land for $10,000 and built a house on it. And houses down here were going for $100,000 and less.
Growth kept pushing down, just pushing right down the South Shore.
Yeah, just go. So I mean, you could come in Carver and get it. Back in the early '80s, you can get a house for $70,000, $80,000.
Yeah. One thing to keep in mind is, because we had one night at one of our select board meetings a couple of years ago, I think, down, Susan Gifford and Senator Pacheco. And the senator looked at us all in the eye and said, if you don't have a school district of $2,000 or 2,000 students, you can't make it.
Yeah.
Because, and that's just the way the state looks at it still. They still want regionals. So I would not look for the state to be doing much help for us, because we're an anomaly to them. They don't like the way we do things.
No, I agree. I mean, Carver, has been always unique in my 36 years here. Carver has always been a little bit unique. Has always been a little different. And when we decided to leave Plymouth, I mean, the whole idea was let's start our own course, and we were doing pretty good. When we had 2,200 students in the school district 20 years ago,
Is that gonna help us
it was
this year?
good. I mean, we were able to marshal on, and things were
Was that
well.
next
We built a new high school. We put a new wing on. Things.
10 years.
Yeah, sorry, you were way too young then, right?
Well, I
But
can say you're a newcomer compared to me.
10.
Yeah,
It's not gonna be bad.
that's true. That is true, Al. I agree.
I can address that.
But when you look at all the growth that we had,
Send me what you got
really
on that,
in the
on the
80s
buses and
and into the late 90s, we were able to do it at a fairly level. We were at a fairly good tax rate, even though we took that big hit to do the high school. But it was the right thing. I mean, the high school was the right thing for Carver, and we just couldn't get ourselves out of our way over the last 20 years. We were stuck. After that, between the police and the fire and the school, and we just were stuck. And because we couldn't generate that revenue, and I think we're at that cycle again. We're at that turning point again, and I just don't want to see what I suspect. And I hate to say this, but I do see the turnover going to be occurring, and I have a feeling it may be more rapid than everybody would like to anticipate, because I am concerned that if you've got 3,400 homes and you've got 1,600 students, if you start churning over 10% of those homes that aren't sending kids to school, so that's 180 homes a year, and you just bring in one student per home, just one, that's almost 200 kids.
And a lot of it's going to be minimum 2.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm just being.
Oh, these are big houses, that's right.
So where do you put those? I mean, I know where you put
Yeah,
them.
it's great. It's great if you can sprinkle them K through 12. We can absorb it, but you can't.
I'm sorry, you don't
Yeah.
have,
Oh, wait a minute.
you're on no have a K, so you can't come
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
It's like you have a gate at the all the entrances to town. Like do you have a first grade? Oh, great, we have a slot available for you.
Well, I know
The
that,
question though is, Mr. Chairman, is what do we do now?
well,
Where do we envision this committee?
So, Alan, can I just address one thing before we go on to that?
Sure.
I know the state pushes the 2,000 number, and I agree with that. But from my perspective of what I've seen Carver do and what we've done, is we're in very good shape for what we have. We own our own buses, right? That's the first big savings piece of it. You're only operating 2 school buildings. I mean, that's you eliminate a lot of dead costs that a lot of districts have if they try to keep 3 different elementaries open across town. So we do a good job of managing that. So again, I just want that to clarify that even though the state says 2,000 is your target mark, it absolutely should be. The Carver School Committee and with the Board of Selectmen, they've done a good job of maintaining adequate facilities and whatnot for
what we've been,
for what we have. Yeah.
We've been dealt. I think between school committee and board, we've done a good job,
Yeah.
and we're doing a good job. It's how do we keep it going?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think the 2,000 to be honest with you, is a rather arbitrary
Exactly.
number
Of
in
course
this
it
day and age, because what you're not factoring in is that the number of students, like for example, we obviously lose students to, Old Colony. We lose students to private schools, whether it be at the elementary levels or the middle and high school levels. So you're losing students anyways, but I think that the important thing is, I grew up in Rockland, I spent all my years there, and Rockland was a 10 square mile town with 5 elementary schools. They all had neighborhood elementary schools. And right now, they've shuttered 2 of them. And all of their elementary schools, and when I say this, all of their elementary schools are more than 50 years old. The last elementary school they built was in 1969.
Well, I just brought it up because, as an indication of, we can't be looking at the state to help us out.
That's right.
Because that's the only thing I was really trying to get across.
That's right.
Because we're not in a position, we're not regionalized, and so they're not going to do much to help us.
But see, I think the school's done, we may not be regionalized, but we're taking advantage of partnering with other communities around, especially on the sports programs, where we can, because we want to field sports, but we don't have enough students. So, going with Sacred Heart and Wareham and, doing these kind of partners with other school districts, I think is a smart thing to do.
I think it's great. Very creative.
But from an educational perspective, I think we just, and I agree with Brad, we have 2 buildings, technically. Yes, we have wings at the high school for the middle, but we had 2 buildings, and you guys have just spent, a large sum of money in upgrading the high school, at the same time that we're building a brand new elementary school. What town does that?
Right.
What town does that?
Yeah,
And
new
oh, by the
fields.
way, build a fire station and talk about building a police station. No towns do that. They look at us at the State House and they think we've got, gone nuts. What are you doing? Maybe they're thinking we're printing money. I don't know.
Well, we ain't just growing cranberries.
Maybe they think we're printing money. I have no idea. But I think, Alan, to really answer your question, I think it's really looking at what is the fuel for the tax levy. And I really think we need to leverage our new growths as much as we can. And I know the stuff Michael's doing with the solar is certainly one thing, but I know, tell me if I'm speaking out of school, Michael, or anything like that, but we need to do a better job in this town in identifying real and personal property that needs to be
Undervalued.
assessed.
That's right.
That needs to be assessed.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think we've been doing a well enough job, and I think we need to
Just on that, we have engaged our consultant they just did a relook at everything.
Yes.
And that is gonna cost us a little bit of money. I think that's part of the reserve transfer we have tonight.
Yeah.
Well, we're taking those lessons that were down there, and what was said at that meeting is that now that he has redone those from scratch,
Personal property, by the way.
personal
Yep.
property, and we looked at that, it's very easy for him to maintain them.
Right.
So that's their job, and I think that the heavy lift is over because we just did it to catch up after realizing how flawed they were for 20 years. or 50
There was almost a little over $4 million in additional personal property tax valuation
Right. And
Where?
in this town, over $4 million
$4
and
million of value, it wasn't being
that
assessed.
wasn't being
Yeah,
expensed.
where was it?
It was.
A little here, a little there, a little there.
It was multiple businesses that weren't being assessed.
Commercial businesses?
Yes.
Yeah.
That anybody who's lived in town for more than 10 years could look at the assessor's database and say, oh, why aren't you here?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I did. I'm not.
But this comes down to,
And our consultant pointed out that
That's
we
right.
corrected the issue, but it had been
Wow.
going on for 20 years.
that's right, this brings it down to exactly what Michael said in the beginning. We did have a meeting, Steve, myself, Michael, Meg, and the consultant, and when this came to when the topic came up, it followed on the heels of there's a staffing issue. So this was stuff that was overlooked. We're not throwing stones at anybody. We're not saying it was intentional or unintentional. Nobody got a good secret deal. It just didn't get caught. And one of the things that brought my attention to it is, and I use Norfolk Power Equipment as the example, because I've talked to Wayne, and I know them, and I bought some equipment there. He said the assessors had been in 3 times over the last 2 years to do valuations, and yet you look at the town website, and they were paying a goose egg. So what happened from the visit to the data?
Well, to that point, because one of the things you brought up was the idea of a split tax rate and going back to the single tax rate. As somebody who's lived here my whole life, I don't remember commercial growth in this town as a child the way we've seen it in the last 20 years. And I've lived in North Carver alone, and I can count half a dozen to a dozen new businesses in North Carver in the last 10, 15, 20 years that have popped up that weren't here as a kid. And everybody references the Carver Means Business sign at the end of 44 that used to be there, and of course, right? Because it was oxymoronic in some respects.
Yes, it was.
So every day when I drove by it.
Exactly. So now it's...
I had to change it. I wrote Carver is mean.
Now there's a right to found community sign, and it's more appropriate. But the point being is there's a lot of commercial businesses popped up, even in just that part of town, between Norfolk Power, and you had Frosty Dog at one time, and you had McMahon Insulation's now up there. Yeah. You got the New England Farms, not to be confused with Cumberland Farms.
Look what SLT built on Plymouth Street.
Right, Buildex and everything else.
Triano's place. Like 500 personal properties that he looked at, almost 500?
Yeah, there were a lot that were there, and we used the word $4 million. Keep in mind, again, I just want to emphasize this, and it was said, that's not $4 million in tax revenue.
Right, it's valuation.
$4 million in assessment.
Sure.
Yes, I said that.
1,000 times the rate.
Sure.
I said that. I said it was in valuation.
I know you did.
I didn't say it was a deposit in the checking account.
My point... The good thing about having gone through this exercise now is that we now know what to look for.
That's right.
With hopefully 44 development up there as things are progressing, which I'm assuming.
And then you look at additional growth.
That's one of the reasons why we're going to be looking at restructuring how the assessing department is.
Yep.
Because it's something that we weren't aware of. And kudos to Steve, because Steve sniffed it out. He said there's something not adding up here. And we didn't have it fully identified at first, but we had a direction. And the consultant found it. Because the consultant was going off of old data they were given because that's what they were told to do.
My point in mentioning that in some respects is because I used to think that a split tax rate and the commercial tax rate was a deterrent for commercial business here in town. But with the growth that we've seen in the last 20 years, to my point, it's clearly not keeping commercial business away.
Yeah.
Well, commercial is funny, and so is real estate in general is funny because it's market driven, supply and demand. For the first 20 years, or maybe in the 80s, no businesses wanted to come to Carver because we didn't have any population. 44 wasn't finished. There was no easy way to get here.
Right.
You had to, not having a municipal water supply, not having, septic systems, everything like that is somewhat of a deterrent. But now we have in North Carver, we have a municipal water supply. We have the population. It's been a stable population, for the last, we're 11, 12,000 residents. 44 is finished. So now there's people driving through Carver, and stopping in Carver, and whether they're going to the Dunkin' Donuts or the gas stations or to Shaw's, or there's businesses, people stopping at. King Richard's Fair is a huge draw. And Edaville Railroad coming back, that we went 10 years when Edaville wasn't running.
Yep.
So those things cause businesses not want to come here because you don't have the people, or you're not bringing the people. That's changed.
And we're also
since I've been on the board, is whenever we've had somebody new come before the board for a license, because they're opening up a business, we ask them, was the tax rate, our tax rate, a detriment? Is that something that was bothering you before you came here? And to a one, they've always said it's never been they're factoring. The tax rate just doesn't matter to them.
Yep.
And we're also extraordinarily pro small business.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people that went into landscaping. They've got a couple pieces of equipment. They're able to keep it at their house. They're able to keep it,
they're properly zoned.
Yes.
they're able
You
to,
should go over there right now, get the properly done before you have a logging company.
no, you can't have a logging.
Wood processing plant.
But it's friendly to a small business, so that's a great help. And I learned a long time ago that employees become employers, small businesses grow. So you get a guy that started in his house, and suddenly he's got, 12 pieces of equipment, and he's in a commercial building that just so happens to be in the same town. You look at what's being built off of Spring Street, when that's all done, that's going to be a great industrial park as far as contractor, and they're going to be condos. So this isn't going to be just one guy paying the tax on it and then renting out all the units. This is going to be an investment by self-employed people to have a unit and have a mortgage on that unit. Then there's personal property tax and there's the tax valuation of that unit. So that kind of growth is vital to this town because there's no kids that are going to be living in those contractor bays. Not that I don't want more kids in the town, but when you look at the impact, there's going to be, I agree with Steve, there's going to be a huge impact as we get older and say, we don't need all this house. We don't want to maintain all this house. It's time to go. Whether we stay in the town is the key in how things are run and where we're set.
But it's still not going to stop the impact of the schools because, if you've got a 5-bedroom house, 4-bedroom house, 2,500 to 3,000 square foot house, you're going to see kids come with those parents.
That's right.
And if there was a way you could figure out how to smooth it out, give the schools enough heads up that it's happening. To me that's like you got to be monitoring the realty pages. See how many houses are up for sale in Carver, and see where they are. And go into the town clerk's office and looking at the census and saying, how many homes do we have in Carver where there are no kids? And start mapping this out so that the school knows, heads up, that, hey, there's 10 homes that just went on, the market today, and guess what? None of them have kids in them. And so we have the resources. I mean, the clerk's office knows. We get a census every year.
Well, we have the information, but we don't have the resources.
Well, okay.
To put it.
Well, Steve will have that for us for the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be one of my models I do next. But I mean, the school knows where the students live. The town knows where the people that don't have kids are in the school. We have ways of identifying the potential, hit to the school as far as numbers of students. We may not know who's coming to town, but we have a good idea of when a property leaves. If it's got 4 or 5 bedrooms, they're going to have 1 or 2 kids with them. They're going to have, and that's,
This is kind of a two-sided thing. We're talking about, the income side. But what the town managers, school, select board, town administrator, we also have to watch out on the spending side.
Well, you said, what's the next step?
Comes the contracts and stuff.
Right.
And, we're still fighting the fact that, let's face it, Carver does not pay as much as surrounding towns.
right.
So, and they're always screaming for more. And I'm not just saying the school department, because I've got the same thing on the town side. I mean, I've got, several unions on this side that we have to, fight.
Well, again, I think the important thing is to point out that, while we've had revenue growth, and I mean, obviously, I was one of the, the architects, I guess is the best way of saying it, of, trying to figure out how to remove the police and fire station from the conversation of building it without doing a debt exclusion, because we needed to figure out a way to pave it for the schools, and that was removing those from the conversation, but that meant taking money out of the operating budget. It did, and we all knew going in, it was a balancing. It's always a balancing act. Every year it's a balancing act. It has been, since 1982 with this Proposition 2.5. And I always said the problem with Carver was we grew after 1982. Had we grown before 1982 like the rest of the South Shore, we would have had a higher tax levy to begin with. And we could have probably done more with it. But the reality was, we started off with a $3 million tax levy. You know, we got a $26 million one now, but it's only because of what's occurred over those last 37 years with Proposition 2.5 that's actually caused the tax levy to grow. You know, and so to me, the revenue side of the conversation has to be leveraging as much as new growth as we can. You know, I really think we're missing an opportunity, and I've said this before, a big opportunity over at the airport. I think we need to start thinking about TIFs for businesses who want to put on, and if I remember correctly, we have about 200 acres of land that's Carver that we get nothing from the town of Plymouth. We have no pilot, no nothing. And so we need to leverage those properties, you know, and that property and put businesses there. Plymouth does. You know, they leverage. I don't know what they do to encourage it. I know they have a single tax rate, but I also know that Plymouth is going to, once the power plant gets, you know, deactivated, and
That's where they're going to run out of money.
They're going to be,
Yes, it is.
some serious financial conversations at their town meetings.
But we've
Thank goodness they have elected town
people
meeting.
that have tried to look into it, and they just lose interest. But, you know, I agree with you. I think we should be able to come up with a, you know, a special tax area
Yep.
to go ahead.
We've already identified it as a
that
district. It's
that-
already identified as a district in the zoning bylaws. So to me, it's taking that to the next level. I'm not saying we do a North Carver water district. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about diffs. I'm talking about TIFs. And but do like what Fall River and
Right.
did with Amazon. You know, I mean they gave them a 15-year TIF. Where they're basically paying nothing in property taxes for the first 5 years, you know, and then incremental after
We
that.
can't afford that.
What's that?
We can't afford to do that.
No, but we can afford to match the
We can do
Plymouth rate.
something
Yeah.
comparable or similarly, and
So it all depends too on who's coming in.
agreed.
One of the unique things about Route 44 is it's a large site. There's very few sites in the state where you can put a 500,000 square foot building or a 1 million square foot building. They don't have choices.
Right.
So for somebody coming in that large, you don't have to be as liberal with any types of tax incentive. If they want to build a 50,000 square foot building, you get 250 communities in the state you can build a 50,000 square foot
Right.
building, but they're going to go where the labor and the infrastructure is.
Right.
So those are the things that you need to take into account for. When the Fall River thing was built down there, that was a whole different can of worms. And
Yeah, and quite
you
honestly,
would not give away a
Yeah.
zero tax TIF for
Yeah.
anything
And-
in this. But you will have to most likely give a TIF for a project coming in because the TIF also leverages other state incentives. Doesn't mean you have to give a large TIF.
right,
It just means you have to give a TIF
right.
so they can access the state incentives.
And a lot of things with Amazon, certainly they were going to draw from the New Bedford Fall River market for employment. But they also, too, Fall River was going to be 90 miles away from their two other large distribution centers in Connecticut and New Hampshire. So, and obviously easy access to Providence, easy access to Boston, airports. So that's why Fall River was where it is. And it's right off of 24. I mean, we could never have provided that kind of resource. We don't have the employment market to draw from the population that they were going to need, and we certainly weren't going to do what Fall River did. You know, not that Fall River's management structure is anything to write home about these days. But anyways, that's an editorial.
You've been watching the news, haven't you?
No.
So that begs the question is, what's the next step? What does the board feel we should take the next step? Let's set a next meeting date for this committee and.
Can I throw out some ideas?
Yeah, that's what we're asking.
I've been kind of playing with the last couple of months. So I've really focused on new growth. I think that's our fuel for the engine. We need to maximize our new growth. I really think we need to have a split tax rate, and I would encourage that we don't have less than a 1.45 on the commercial because it impacts our tax levy. You know, we've demonstrated that had we had a straight rate, we'd have almost $900,000 less in a tax levy. So what would you have done then, Brad? What would you have done less with $600,000 less? Go like this. You know, the gate of the mouth would be wider, you know, and so we know we can't do that, but if we have a maximum split on our tax, on our commercial, then we will past history, if any repeat, will maximize our tax levy. So that to me is one thing to. I also look, and I know this is probably sacred ground to be walking on, but you know, we really need to, I think, bring in like Susan Giffords and maybe Senator Pacheco to ask the question about the Chapter 140s, which is the manufactured housing communities. We've had this conversation many, many times. There's been talk about legislature on how do we treat those. You know, they pay 1/8 of the property tax of a single-family home. They only pay property taxes on common buildings and land. In the 25% of our residential units in this town are considered manufactured housing communities in the 4 villages and Meadowood estates. 1,100 homes. 1,100 homes. And while I don't believe we should tax current resident owners as real property on their homes, I think whenever there's a changeover of the resident owner, I think then we should be considering that as real property that is subjected to the property tax. That also allows the seniors in those communities to be eligible for the exemptions that we can't give them right now because they don't pay a property tax on their homes. So they can't get the veteran exemption, they can't get the senior work exemption, they can't get any of those because they don't pay property tax on their home, and I don't think that's right. We have a lot of seniors who contribute to the town, and they can't get a deduction. So I think it's fair to talk about it, you know, and make sure that you're not hurting the current residents, that it's a future thing, so that if anything, if there's new growth with that it's gradual, it's sustainable, until the point where we don't have any, you know, we're not collecting $108 every year, we're collecting a property tax on their homes. And I think that that's a fair conversation to have in the States. The other thing it does too, you know, if the average mobile home is $100,000 or, you know, $150,000, depending on where you live and in which community, you know, those are homes that are affordable for a lot of folks. And I think that's something we have to take into consideration. We've always gotten dinged for not having affordable homes because they don't count manufactured homes as a home. Even though I know people that live there, my mother-in-law lived there for more than 20 years, and I have a lot of folks that...
And what do they say? Come over to my house.
That's right.
Come to my home and have dinner, or let's have a party or something. Hey. The residents consider them homes. But, and I agree with you, it's something with the state, we really got to push it because, you know, a quarter of your housing is not housing.
Yeah, we're in a unique situation. 25% of our homes are manufactured homes. No other community in the state, I don't think, has more than 10%. You know, we are, and you know, they've been here for so long. They've been here since the 80s and before that. You know, I mean, I remember when I first came here to look at the houses in Carver, I had to go in the Plymouth entrance of South Meadow Village because I didn't know, because the Ward Street entrance hadn't been opened yet. They hadn't developed that end of that. So I thought I was living like 10 miles from my mother-in-law. Well, when they opened up the Ward Street, I found out I was a mile away from her because she was at the other end of the end of the village. But I mean, you have these beautiful villages that are maintained by the residents, for the residents, and yet, you know, they don't get treated like a homeowner. They get treated like, you know, they live in a village, and, you know, it might be like an island, I guess, you know, and, you know, I think that's something that we're at the point now we have to have that conversation, I think. But I don't want it to be that it's at a detriment of the existing owners. They bought knowing what it is, the town, you know, created
They went
these.
in with playing by a set of rules, and it's not fair to change the rules, you know, the rules of the game right in the middle of
No, you can't.
Absolutely, right.
What you do is, like, I agree. New ones come in, you set the new rules there.
But are the change in rules going to railroad or going to sink the sale?
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. They try to sell
You know, they can go buy in Rockland.
Property values would be...
Right. I mean, in other states, manufactured homes are treated as real property. They're not.
But what about in this state? What happens to the manufactured homes You look at Oak Point, but which is huge in Middleborough and not without its problems. But the other surrounding towns, if we take and pass this, if the town were to adopt this program, what would happen when an individual tried to sell their home in the village and there was no takers because the law now changes with the new people coming in?
But what you're anticipating is that they're gonna pay a single-family home tax rate.
No, they wouldn't.
Taxability.
It'd be less.
You might be looking at, $1,500, in additional taxes to that. And is that gonna be, but I'm not saying change this for the town of Carver. I'm not saying do a home rule. I'm saying the state needs to step up
Yeah.
and change it so that it's equal across the board. That this is a.
Well, that's certainly easier.
No, it's not. No, it's not, because it's been, but here's the whole thing. This is considered new growth. It's new growth. It's something that comes in. But it's not fair that residents of the villages can't get exemptions on their taxes. And that's the reason they can't, because they
Well, they
don't.
feel that they've been given the golden egg by having a tax bill that's,
Hey,
$11 a month or something like that.
well, I can tell you the fees over in the villages. First of all, if you go to South Meadow Village or Cranberry Village, you gotta do a buy-in now. You gotta buy a share because they're owner now. So you have to buy a share. Then you have to buy the unit. Then you have to pay the monthly fees. And last time I looked, some of the fees are $300-400
Keep going. Friend of ours is paying $625 a month in Plymouth after she paid $160,000 cash for the house.
Right.
When she sold her house in Rochester, she moved there, and that started out 4 years ago. It was cheaper, like $380 a month, and that was supposed to be all-inclusive. They move your snow and all that. Well, it didn't really work out quite that way, and she's up to almost $700 a month, $680 a month.
It's not
For the common fee for the maintenance fee.
Yeah, and it's not just the
In Plymouth, right behind
it's not just the
Walmart
cost.
and all of that.
It's not just the cost of maintenance. I mean, in each property owner in the villages pays the taxes on the common land and the common buildings.
Yep.
So they're already paying, part of the real estate. They're just not paying it on their property. And
Right. They're paying it in the
I know
maintenance
it's
fee.
a tough subject. I mean, believe me, like I said, my mother-in-law lived there 20 years. She had her, spot. I mean, South Meadow Village was, built in the late 70s was when they started that, and they finished developing it in the mid-80s. It's certainly 500 plus homes there. I mean, there's a lot of homes in just that one thing, and the rest of them have. I think they're like Cranberry is maybe 250, and Pine Tree's around 200, and then Waterview is like 60, and Meadowwood Estates is like 60. So,
Steve, don't be afraid. You can bring this stuff up. You're not elected.
right? No, I understand that, but I still do live in town, and I just want to make sure people. I mean, I'm not looking at the existing homeowners and saying you have to pay more taxes.
And we have
I'm
to be clear
saying
about that.
I'm saying as it's switch it. And you know what? There may be properties in the villages that are not resident owned. They may be being rented out. The absent owner, maybe they've moved out of state. Those people there, they probably should be paying property taxes. And why? Because it's a rental property. And why is that being treated as if they're a resident owner? And so, to me, that's why Chapter 140 needs to be looked at. I think it's long past its time, especially in Carver. I say it's 25% of the homes today. It was, like 30+%, years ago. So it's certainly something, and I would treat that as new growth. I mean, if you listen to what Paul was saying, if you haven't taxed it before as real property, it's new, then you can count in new growth. New growth adds to the tax levy. Increasing the tax levy, good. And yes, in this situation here, it's even better because chances are manufactured housing communities aren't going to send anybody to the schools. And then there will be, treated just like a real property and eligible for exemptions and all that. So it's something that I think I'd like to have that conversation with Senator Pacheco and Susan.
Yeah, Mark, yeah.
Yeah.
Just for your information on that point, I had a conversation with someone about a new house that was built in Cranberry Village online, and the house was $218,000. It was 1,345 square feet. There was a $100 one-time fee, and it was $510 a month for taxes and everything else.
After you paid the $200,000.
After the house.
Yeah, right.
After the house. So they're paying, if you go on that, they're paying $61.20 per year, just in the fee and the taxes and everything.
Yeah, but-
that doesn't include the plowing, the plus.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not all taxes.
Oh, no, that's not all taxes. No.
Yeah, because I mean, the taxes that the average home in Cranberry Village pays to the town. So they pay about $499 in property taxes. They pay another $15 in CPA surcharges, and then they pay $108 a year in their annual license fee, which goes to the Board of Health, I think, is how that works. So they're paying about $622. So really, the $50 a month is what goes to the town of Carver from Cranberry Village. The rest of that money goes for maintaining the price. That seems awfully high, though. Is it $600 a month?
They're saying, well, there was
Have they gone up that much?
510 says.
Don't you guys control this? Don't you have, aren't you a
No.
control board?
No.
You control
They're
board?
paying for their sewer system, you gotta keep that in mind. They're
Right.
paying for their insurances, they're paying for their plowing.
Yeah, the road
You're
maintenance.
paying for all the common areas.
Rubbish
Yeah,
removal.
because those roads are not accepted by the town, right?
Yeah, the
They're
water.
paying for the wells.
Right.
Right.
They're, where people have, if you live in North Carver, you have a water bill,
Right.
it's a separate charge. Theirs is all inclusive.
And of course, they're not town-accepted roads, so they're not responsible for paving, plowing,
Right.
any maintenance at all in the
Maintenance.
They
villages.
pay what, their phone and electric? I think it's their own.
I can't imagine that would be included in that.
Right, I mean, that's the only other charges they have is phone and electric, I think.
They didn't mention that. But.
Yeah. But I mean, but when they get, so the way I know it worked with South Meadow Village, because they were one of the first that went to resident-owned manufactured housing communities. The association was required to provide a 1099 every year that told how much they paid in taxes to the town, so they could deduct that off their taxes. So they were required to, it wasn't a 1099, it was a W-4. Anyway, they were required to provide a tax form that told them how much of their fees were taxes.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest then maybe we set a next meeting and try very hard to get Representative Gifford and Senator Pacheco at that meeting, because I can think of several topics we could probably try to talk with them, just to let them know that, is the state, first off, find out, is there any appetite at the state legislature to do anything, or to at least bring forth some ideas for them to take to the legislature.
How about even just like make sure we throw in a conversation of Chapter 70 funding?
Well,
because we got this. We don't need a gator.
Well, there was a proposal on Beacon Hill, I think I sent you the link earlier, a few months ago, a proposal for $100 per child, per student, per community. And the majority, including Senator Pacheco, voted it down. So we got, what, I think in this article, I think we go, what, to 30?
And that
From
was
25?
passed, yeah.
That was passed.
That was passed.
But there was a proposal for $100 per student, and the reason they gave for voting it down was they couldn't control where the money went. They wanted the money to go to certain communities and not, instead of just, well, it could be more fair than just giving everybody $100 per student. So our senator voted it down, so I wouldn't look for much help
That's the
from him.
reason to bring him in here,
That's right.
have a little chit chat.
You never get them in here, but I'll give it a shot. You want to reach out to Susan?
Sure, you get me a date, and I'll reach out to her. Sure.
Mark has her
So-
on speed dial.
Do we have a sense of what income is a factor in Chapter 70 funding, correct? So do we have an indication of any kind as to the relative or the correlation between average income in town and how that impacts Chapter 70 funding? Does it behoove us to have a higher median income in town, or is there a cost negative with our Chapter 70 funding if we increase our average income in town? I.e., if we're attracting a more affluent residents, is that negatively impacting our Chapter 70 funding or not? Because I would argue, with this turnover that's coming, that's what's going to happen.
Well,
And I would argue that you're correct in the fact that we are attracting a more affluent, just in the basic cost of a house in this town now.
It's through the roof. To your point, Steve, you mentioned earlier, we're looking at going to the clerk's office and finding out property values are above where they were in 2007, 2008, and house
Considerably.
prices are significantly higher than where they were even at that time, even at the height of the
I
market.
think someone just recently told me that the average price of a house for sale in Carver is over 400 now.
that would not surprise me.
Well, I talked to the previous town planner, and we were having, an off the top of the head conversation, and he told me a lot of times now in Carver, people are spending the 350,000 for the lot.
Right.
Because they have every intention to tear the house down
That's right.
and build new.
That's right.
The quick answer to that,
Which has been happening in other
Adam,
communities
is
for a
it
long,
just,
long time.
that gator mouth just becomes that much more. That's all.
So
that
the
happens.
more affluent, the
more
worse it
affluent,
gets.
the state would say, we're gonna give you less Chapter 70
Right.
money, and it just keeps on.
Which is why I'm bringing it up, is because I don't, even though we're going to add, theoretically, right, if we add families and we add income, we're adding children, so the need is higher, and the Chapter 70 funding is less.
Right.
Because
At some point, though, you catch up. It's just, there's no hard, I can't say 400 kids, I can't say 300, because there's a lot of variables that are involved in that, but at some point, you hit that break-even mark where you're in line with where we should be.
Sure. But I also think too that the more, to our conversation before, the more affluent the community, the more they prioritize educational spending.
The lower
And-
state funding you get.
Well, yeah, and families are, look, they're more supportive of an override or a debt exclusion for education purposes because they see the value in investing in education.
Right.
And not to say that the folks here in town don't, or we wouldn't have gotten the debt exclusion that we did. It's just, it's common in the more affluent communities that they're spending more of their own personal dollar on education
Yeah.
than what we're seeing in other towns.
Absolutely.
Difference though between underride and override. Because it's override in this town, and you'd have to get a huge influx of new people, because override in this town has a very bad connotation.
And it should.
Oh, no, I agree.
I have no problem with that
But
at
I
all.
agree with them, the more affluent people, that, oh yeah, I can afford a few more bucks,
Yeah,
for an override or something like that. And most of this town can't.
that's right.
But see,
And there's another elephant in the room. We've had discussions with Old Colony, and they went from discussing adding on to their school to offer a couple more programs to the possibility of a whole brand-new school. And we're married to a district. So whatever that percentage becomes that's ours, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, I think we discussed this. We could be on a hook for that percentage of the debt exclusion or the loan,
Millions of dollars.
which is millions of dollars. So that could be, so you throw that in the wax, along with the union contracts on both sides of the fence that want their increases, and we find ourselves, it's no longer on the head of a pin. Now it becomes on the head of a nail, because now we're trying to figure out, this is going to be a big deal. So trying to get a handle on it well in advance so that we can make some preparation.
Can the town buy
I mean,
an annual lottery ticket?
Honest to God.
well,
Powerball.
just to Adam's point a little bit, it's going to take a long time for Carver's per capita income to change dramatically. I mean, we're at 70% of the state average for per capita income. We're at $29,500, where the state average, the state is at $41,200. So it's going to take a lot of movement of people to bring us up, and therefore negatively impact our Chapter 70. But again, if you look at the more affluent communities to the north, particularly in counties, Middlesex County and Norfolk counties, and even Suffolk County, where Boston is, they're at 100% or more of the state. I mean, Middlesex County is at 131% of the state average. Their per capita income is almost $55,000. So to the point is that, yes, they're spending the money than the schools, but they're 130% of the state average. They're almost twice our per capita income. And so they can afford to spend more. And it's going to take a long time of any changes in this town because, I mean, not all the old people in this town are, they're making pretty good income too. So you're not always replacing it with a much higher just because you're having somebody who's 20 years younger. Some of the old folks make some good money too.
No, but I think what I'm alluding to is that based on what I'm seeing with home prices in this town, the folks that are coming into town and buying in this town have to be more affluent to afford the houses in this town.
Just to qualify.
Because the houses that are being sold were purchased, to your point, for $10,000 back in 1982.
$100,000.
No, but I'm saying, they bought the lot and built the house.
But you're not. You don't know where they came from. So they may have come from a more affluent town where they sold their house for $600,000, and in their mind they're downsizing in Carver at $400,000. So you don't know where you can't always presume that they're buying up.
Yes, but I would also argue that the per capita income in this town is skewed somewhat because I would venture to guess that the bulk of this town is self-employed.
No, I would disagree with that.
You don't think so?
No. What probably is helping the town per capita income, and no disrespect to anybody who's retired, but we have 1,100 manufactured homes, and a lot of the folks in those homes are retired. Congratulations, you won. We're still working. So they're more on a fixed income. I'm not saying that they're not living check to check, but their income is probably low because they're not working. They're using their retirement savings, or maybe they don't have any expenses. They bought their home for $200,000 because they sold their other home for $300,000, and they just took the proceeds to do that. So our per capita income does get probably lowered a little bit because first of all, it's a per capita income. So guess what? Last time I looked, manufactured housing communities, generally speaking, have 2 people or less in them, and they don't have a lot of per capitas. And so our student populations are shrinking, so we have less students. We have less population we did 10 years ago. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, but
there is a birth shortage right now too. The last 2 years, nationally, there's a birthing shortage that's still going on. So I know. We think more students are going to come, which I'm sure they're going to, but I don't think they're going to come at an accelerated rate.
No, and I don't think what you're going to see is, as Alan is saying. I mean, you have folks that are 60 plus, and there's plenty in this room that we have homes, and in 5 or 10 years. Somebody else is going to give it. It's not going to be people who are having kids for the first time. You're going to come from another town with 1 or 2 kids or 3 kids, and Brad's going to have to open the door and welcome them in because they're here.
Thomas Chairman, being there, it's 8:46.
Yes, and we have another meeting right behind this one.
So that's what I'm saying with.
And this is obviously getting to be past Alan's bedtime.
He played golf today.
Oh, that's what's killing him, I understand.
I need to go home and relax.
This is supposed to be a form of relaxation for you. This
Well, it is more relaxing
town
than
government.
Board meeting I have to sit on.
See, isn't this nice and easy? We noticed you were missing at the last one, by the way, and
Yes, because
the
I was
vice
working.
chair did a hell of a job of running that
That's what I
meeting.
heard.
It's much more quiet and peaceful. Oh, I'm sorry, Ron. All right, let's look at some dates. Let's start off with the real pain in the neck. When are you available in October? We're here tonight because this was the only night for His Majesty.
Really true. I gave you 2 nights.
Yeah, yesterday and
Tomorrow.
tonight.
No, tonight and tomorrow.
No, yesterday.
No, yesterday and tonight.
Well, last week was.
Yeah, that's right. It was yesterday.
Yeah.
Right.
Not the week of the 7th, perhaps the 14th, the week of the 14th.
Not the week of the 14th, or perhaps the week of the 14th?
Perhaps the week of the 14th.
How about the 17th? It's a Thursday. Kate cannot make Tuesdays. Everybody seems to be good with Thursdays, except I know that kind of sucks for you.
Bowling night?
I can make it work.
The 17th? Everybody?
Sure.
17th, good for Michael, Pat?
When's the select board having the tax rate hearing for fiscal 2020?
Our meetings are always on Tuesdays. Our meetings are always on Tuesdays.
That wasn't the question he
No, the
asked you.
tax rate hearing, is that going to be the first one or the second?
You'd have to ask the chairman.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Vice Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Have to ask the chairman.
Because where Thanksgiving
Kick
is
that can
the,
right down the road, huh?
Thanksgiving's the 28th this year, so
It's called delegation
Late.
skills.
so you guys will probably meet, you meet first and third?
Yes.
So it'll be the 5th or the 19th. Okay.
So it'd have to be the 5th if you want me there, because I will not be there the 19th.
5th of the 19th of what?
November.
And the assessor's going to
Oh,
have it on the 5th.
November. Okay, I'm still on October.
Yeah, it's gonna, we
We're
jump.
doing the 17th of October?
17th of October, are we okay with that?
Sure, we can shoot for that.
All right, let's do that.
Let's finish that one first.
Yeah, really. Go easy on me.
It's automatic.
Try to get the big room.
Yes. Well, it's a Thursday weekend, tonight we got booted because the town administrator threw us out of the upstairs for the prima donnas on the planning board.
You're number 4 on the list.
Number 4,
Interesting.
Select board, school committee, planning board, and you guys.
have to do
But
something
you try
about it.
hard.
Just an FYI, the school committee has changed their meeting dates to Thursdays now.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
How
so-
come?
but we're meeting the 10th. So we're good for the,
Ah, you're killing me. All right, 17th for this next sustainability study meeting. With that, thank you, Mr. Selectman, Mr. Selectman. Brad, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Board of Select.
you may be dismissed if you'd like.
Thank you.
We're going to go into a regular Finance Committee meeting for the purpose of dealing with this funds transfer. You're welcome to stay.
We'll thank you after you go ahead and do what your part was, the regular.
I can't let Meg ain't leaving
I
yet.
know, that's what you said.
He's not gonna thank me.
So the two selectmen are not interested in this ridiculously high transfer request that's causing funding in the
Big
town.
as a request, Mr. Administrator.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we knew that there was no interest in that. Look, and now he's suddenly, now they're interested.
42.
Thank you so much.
And how much money do they have to play with?
25.
Thank you, sir.
So 42.
Yes, sir.
Night, Andy. Thank you.
So, you're not, if it was like 84, I'd be more.
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. You're just gonna, you're running right over to Mamma Mia's right now. I know what you're doing. It's all right. Brad, thank you. Send me that, please.
Inclusion.
Have a great night. Thanks for coming.
It was over.
Okay, we're gonna sneak right into the,
So when personal property is useful life of business, sells it. Just catching up on those away.
yeah, that's all right.
Then.
We'll take a second.
Thanks for joining us.
Actually, while we're assembled here, let's look at the next regular FinCom meeting,
Personal property.
while Steve's dealing with that.
The word you want to use is to do an underwrite. Reduce that.
We canceled the one that was going to be 2 days from now,
So.
and I have no other Finance Committee meeting scheduled for the rest of the month.
You stop paying the new excise tax. So the town, someone else,
Used to pay them.
Used to pay that first tax.
When are we gonna start breaking into budgets, Meg?
So they do it.
We're doing a revenue forecast now, so that's what Mike was saying before. So we're gonna work on the revenue forecast by the end of September, beginning of October, and then we haven't set a date for when.
Tax levy.
No, you normally do it in January, February,
You know,
but
by itself naturally,
we can
except for like.
do everything I'd like to do, and maybe in December, but that depends on what close out with.
Okay.
I think last year budgets were due around Thanksgiving.
Well, those are due there, but we gotta get to your closeout and then jump into.
It's going good, you?
Would it be okay for us to start having just the informal discussions like we did last year with some of the departments to see just where you're at and what's your wish list and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we can probably start that in December.
The state knows for
December?
Per capita income, so.
I was thinking about starting that like October.
those numbers look right.
No, they're not, we're just finishing up capital, we're moving into operating budgets.
They say, okay. this is
Because last year you did them in January, February.
I think we did some ahead of that, just with the wish list and stuff. I think we were doing them in October, November. We weren't getting with budgets, we were just getting with the where
No,
you're
I
at
think you need
and,
to focus everything
more or less.
okay,
You know,
Just where everything falls in place.
Here, we're 70% of the state.
okay.
29,000.
Well, I don't think we have anything then for the rest of this month.
So that-
We could do a FinCom meeting on, a regular FinCom meeting on October 3rd. If we get any, there's supposed to be still 2 applications that are coming in for the grant program. I've sent out copies.
It's in.
We got correspondence back, thank you very much. South Shore Community Action and the one other one, I can't remember the name of, but, no, we did that one. But the South Shore, the 2 that didn't, South Shore Community Action and, yeah. I think that with the women's, yeah. So I'm gonna reach out to them again and find out where those applications are, because that was passed at town meeting for us to fund that. So tentatively, and this is a cancelable meeting, tentatively, what are your thoughts about throwing it out there for the 3rd of October?
But
Okay. No, we can move it around. This is not a vital meeting. How about this? Why don't we not schedule a meeting right tonight,
You know what you didn't do last year?
and we'll put something together and I'll send out emails and do like we did the last time.
Is you didn't, I don't think you ever got a presentation from the school committee, did you?
Okay.
No.
Maybe the thing to do is just to do like a year-to-date from Brad in October or something like that, and let him know and just get a feel for where things are at, because you can get through a lot of stuff in that initial discussion, and he can kind of forecast where things are going.
We could do that at the sustainability study for the next meeting and leave it be that presentation from Brad,
It's true.
because that would work out better through the sustainability group. Why don't we just leave that October meeting where it is for now? It's only the 10th of September. If something comes up and it's kind of hot and we got to do something with it, I can send out an email and we can try to put together a short notice meeting to deal with the grant programs and stuff like that. And then, because once we start getting into the swing of the budget season, there's going to be probably 2 meetings a month for the first couple of months until we get through it all. So then it brings us into the holidays and into January and all that nonsense. So, okay, and why don't we go right to your budget request?
Okay, so give the 3.
I have it here. You might want to explain it, because we didn't have enough copies. I will pass these around. These are all together. I didn't know that. I started passing out individuals. So let me go that way with it. And
Right, so I have 2 for assessing and 1 for accounting.
So just before Meg gets started, I mean, in context, a lot of this came out of discussions when Steve and Alan, Meg, I, and met with our consultant, Paul Capinos, going over a bunch of things and identifying things that, again, hadn't been done in 20 years. And we all know the story. If you don't have good data, you know, that's where our problem was.
that's it.
And, you know, out of this, we found $4 million of unaccounted for personal property that should have been accounted for, now it is.
Now we have accurate records, and maintaining those will be very easy compared to starting them over again. But we had to go through some costs to make sure that that all occurred. Plus, and with that, what has also been identified is that the staffing folks that we have needed a lot of extra support. So we've had to bring in a lot of consulting to help them through and help them move some of these things along. Hence, we are going to be looking at restructuring that department tied into the finance over the next few months, which will go into our budget package when that goes forward. But again, what we're trying to do today is fix problems that happened in the past that we were unaware of and make sure they don't happen again. And where possible, raise the stature of the department up for training. And where that's not possible, then we need to continue to have the consulting there until we can restructure and bring new people in.
So with the reserve fund transfer, the idea is that it was not foreseen when your budget was drawn up, because otherwise you should have budgeted for it. And last
Because you
year...
didn't talk to me, Meg.
What?
You didn't talk to me.
I didn't talk to you?
First, then you would have known.
Oh.
Right.
That's true, okay.
You know, how many years would you were in the town before you raised this issue?
You should have talked to me.
I know.
You should have solved this problem 20 years ago if you had really been doing the data then.
Right, so last year, when we were drawing up budgets around Thanksgiving, that was before, and I've been working with the assessing office for some time to try to dig into the office, because I am a finance director, my background is accounting, and my role as finance director is I have a treasurer collector, I have an assistant town accountant, I have a payroll coordinator, and I rely on all of them to share their knowledge with me so that I can troubleshoot, get them the resources that they need, coordinate with other offices. And with the assessing office, what I was having trouble was drilling down into what was going on in the office. And then in January, what I did is I brought in a consultant because after talking to Paul Capinos and realizing there were issues with the data and that there was an issue with mapping, I brought in the consultant to try to bring structure to the office. So the first request I have here is for $18,450 for FY20. The reason being is that the amount that I've earmarked, the amount that's in the assessing professional services right now of the balance is $37,550. All of that is earmarked for Paul Capinos' contract. So there is no additional money to be had at this particular point. And so that request, the $18,450, is to, we do have a new contract with Paul, because in doing the work, he realized how much personal property had been overlooked, the $4.4 million valuation that we discussed before. So he had to increase his fee because he is picking up more of a workload, because his contract started 3 years ago when the finance department was created. And at that particular point, I don't think that it had been as clearly delineated how much we were going to rely on Paul and how much the office was going to be able to pick up. So at that 3-year mark, when his contract expires, he realizes he needs to pick up more work. And so that's part of it, but then also to have the consultant come in and train staff on a regular basis, which we're hoping to wean off of, but that's where we stand. So that's the $18,450, and then also tied into that, as I mentioned before, is that mapping was not being updated.
Now explain the mapping for those that don't know what you're
So
talking
mapping
about.
is like, if you go upstairs, you'll see the maps, the outside of the office, and residents will come in and take a look at the maps, but it also has a component where it impacts the 911 system if it's not kept up to date. So for the last 3 years, it has not been updated. And again, it's been trying to get this information from the staff, and what I did not realize, which was not shared with me, is that the state did reach out to the department. The vendor reached out to the department, and the previous town employee reached out to the department, and that was not shared with me. So 3 years of...
On numerous occasions.
On numerous occasions, so...
Monthly.
So the mapping system does need to be updated, and that's at a cost of $17,050 because it's for multiple years.
Just real quick, specifically speaking, what you're alluding to is the assessment mapping is not complete or updated, taking into account new construction and new homes?
In 3 or 4 years.
So if a house was in a place and an ambulance needed to find it, they may not know where it is?
That's correct.
That is correct.
that's
And the state,
unacceptable
and the state on several occasions requested and reminded, and it was ignored. So this is why there's internal strife within the assessing department. That's some other stuff that's going on.
Now, where this would have played out is, now in Carver, because our dispatch is all internal in the town, with our fire department, they, even without a map, they know where everything is, but if we were on a regional 911 dispatch or something like that, and they're going off of the state maps for that, and they were dispatching for the town, that's where you would have potentially ran into an issue.
But if there were a situation with mutual aid, then the town covering them, if we were trying to help out
Depending
mutual
upon
aid
who's
in Plymouth, and somebody from Halifax was covering the town of Carver, then you could have an issue where they wouldn't know where the hell they were
The
going.
bottom line, it was unacceptable. We found that there was appropriate
That's right.
actions taken with the employee.
What is
Yeah, so
the,
it has been addressed and will also be addressed in future budgets so that this does not happen again.
okay, is it a standard to do an update yearly?
Every year.
Yeah.
Every year, right, okay.
How much does it normally cost, like yearly?
I think probably,
It's not a lot, but I'm just wondering.
We have, what, 4,500
Yeah.
budget per year, something like
Yeah.
35?
Now, this is a
Yeah,
big
it would
number
be
because
like
we
more
gotta
in the
get the
range of 3,000
update
to
done.
4,000.
It's gotta get caught up, but it's, I think you sent me the thing, it was like 5,000 a year or 4,500 or
but
something
I also
like
think
that.
that has, I'm not gonna speak to that 100%, but I think that that may even be higher just because there's catch-up work involved with that, because I think we were paying more in the range of $3,500 per year previously. Okay, so that's the 17,050. The last one is for the accounting office. Well, I'm doing it because my accounting budget covers the software costs. And this is really actually related to the collections financial software. Because we have the accounting and the treasurer's financial software is on a cloud-based program. The collections and assessing are on a non-cloud-based program. So during fiscal 2019, we realized that, and again, this was not anticipated when the budget was drawn up, was that we only had a limited number of licenses for the employees on our server. So we actually have an employee upstairs who cannot access the system because we ran out of licenses. So in discussing this with IT, his suggestion was that we go to the cloud-based version of that collection software as well. But that carries a price of $6,399.35, which again was not anticipated when the budget was drawn up.
So in addition to having these financial issues be solved, again, when we made aware of this through HR, we've taken the appropriate personnel actions that need to take when you have something of
Egregious nature.
serious as this, with multiple notifications, things should have been done that do affect public safety, as well as other training and other issues that have been done. And again, I'm going to emphasize, we're going to go back into relooking at the department. For those that weren't aware, 4 years ago, the structure of the assessing department under the 3-member board of assessors was to have a director of assessing, and then an assistant assessor, and then a full-time assessing assistant. So there were 3 full-time people in the department with no external support, or limited. When we had a retirement of the director, it was determined, and I'll take full responsibility for this because I still think it was the right decision, that we needed to bring in an outside consultant because we had other issues. These are the issues we're talking about now. There have been other issues that we've had to correct. And what we knew was that the best solution for us was to bring in another person, an outside consultant, and then hire that individual to do that. In doing so, we took the middle person and raised that individual's salary up by a grade, I think it was, or 2 grades. To bring them up a little bit more, because we were going to give them some more responsibility, more like an office manager responsibility, but not the technical responsibility, because we wanted someone licensed, skilled, educated in that area to be dealing with our assessing in the town. So that went on, and that's the structure we've had for a while. We did find issues with that, and it's that second person that we need to change. However, we did find issues with the other person, and we've now split that position into two positions, two part-time positions. So there's cross-checking that's going on before, which there wasn't before. So, you know, again, there's going to be some more structural changes that we're going to be looking at as to how to redefine that. But, you know, part of our challenge is, in the municipal world, finding people that are certified and qualified in any type of municipal finance or municipal management is surprisingly very difficult to do. People get tired and they don't want to get the political bullshit and the social media, so they don't get involved in it. Or they, you know, they work in the private sector and generally make more money from that aspect. So that's always a concern. You can restructure the department in 18 different ways, but you're going to be able to backfill the positions. So, you know, we're going to choose to continue to, you know, divide the department up between active staff and also outside consulting coming in to do the work and figure out how that plays out.
And just from a structural standpoint, direct report is to you or to Meg?
All finance we have now going to Meg. So Meg oversees.
That's a change.
Well, no. 4 years ago, assessing, accounting, treasurer, collector, all were their own fiefdoms. When I changed Meg's position to a director of finance, then we moved her from the accountant to the finance director, and then had assessing, accounting, and treasurer collector report to the finance director. So for the last 3 years, 3.5 years, seems like 30 to her, it's been that Meg has been the point person for all those. But, you know, with that, even with her, is that she said I had to learn the treasurer collector stuff, which was the first priority because we had the biggest weakness in that initially with an elected treasurer collector. So that piece has been done, and then the last year it's been okay, let's go to the next, you know, in priority, what's the next issue in our department? Assessing. And lo and behold, we started to find some issues already, which we got PK involved, and then Steve found additional issues.
Sure.
And so assessing has been where the problem has been that needs to be better corrected in the department. And, you know, we have a chairman of the Board of Assessors, and the Board of Assessors work well, but, you know, at the end of the day, they can only do with the information they're given. And we think that there's more information that should be given, more data that should be discussed, more activities that should be going on for more transparency, and that's what we're trying to implement.
Yeah. And if I just want to add one thing, I think the assessor's job is going to get markedly more difficult because the state's moving from a triennial valuation to a quinquennial for 5 years. But from what Paul was saying, there's going to be more pressure during those 5 years to do these evaluations more broadly, you know, and I think that's going to be a more aggressive approach. The state wants to, because I think the state realizes the same thing that I've been saying. Assessed values, the fuel. If you don't get that right, you're not getting your tax levy right.
That's right.
And if you're not getting your tax levy right, from the state perspective, that means cities and towns are coming to them and say, give us more. But if the cities and towns aren't assessing properly and therefore not taxing properly, that means they're not collecting their own revenues. Because the state wants to give the appropriate amount of aid to the cities and towns that need it. And if cities and towns think that, or either intentionally or unintentionally not assessing properly, they'll get the state aid, so it's okay. And the state's saying, maybe it isn't. Maybe you need to be doing a better job at the local level before you put your hand out for state aid. And I think that's ties in nicely to what's going on here, which is it's all about sustainability. It's not just the town of Carver, it's the state. You know, they want to make sure that they have the right tax revenues to support the cities and towns. You know, maybe, I don't know who said about getting a town lottery ticket, but that would be nice. Unfortunately, the state controls that.
Jump on that a little bit, is even though we're talking about an issue that's here, this is part of our continuous improvement that we're doing within the department. And overall, the financial structure we have in this town and how our department operates is far better than 90% of the other communities in the state, as demonstrated by our auditors on time and time again.
That's right.
So, again, we're talking about an issue that we found, Steve's helped find, and we're fixing it, and we're correcting it, and it looks bad, but at the end of the day, we're still heads and tails above what many of our other peers are going through.
And where we were 5-10 years ago.
Absolutely.
But it's off the charts.
And we're talking about cities and towns that are bigger than us. I mean,
That have the resources.
More resources, right?
That's right.
So, I mean, once again, Carver, finds a way to do it with the minimal amount we can.
And I think that the key is that once these issues come to light, that they're no longer ignored, that they're out there now, and it's my charge to make sure that they stay addressed.
Yeah, and you bring them to the appropriate committee and the board, and one thing I will say about the town is that when something comes before the selectmen, it's acted on right away. Something comes before us, we try to get right on it and deal with it as fast as we can. So that when we find the errors, and I've gotten to know Meg well enough over the last year to know that she takes such pride in what she does that when she finds this stuff, she wants it fixed, and she wants it fixed yesterday, because this stuff upsets her. And I think Beth could relate to that, because she's a numbers person, and just like Meg is, so that when there's a number that's not right on that piece of paper, they stay up nights. Don't ask me why, but they stay up nights worrying about this stuff. And
There's a reason why accounts stay up at night, is because they don't want to look at it first thing in the morning, because they know somebody else is going to be outside their door wanting an answer to the question that they knew the answer to yesterday, but now they've got to fix the problem that they can't.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So, it all falls to them, and I think that, I know that you've said it too, and Beth oversees a budget that's twice the size of the town of Carver's at the South Shore Hospital. So, these are numbers that they're bigger for her, but they still drive her just as crazy, so.
What's the completion date for the mapping update?
Right now, what we have is, we have a quote, so as soon as if you should choose to approve this tonight.
That ain't happening.
The quote is going to go in tomorrow, and then they have all the information. So I would believe it a quick turnaround, but believe me, it is something that I'm going to stay on daily.
Okay. No, I'm just wondering how quick that turnaround
I
would
think
be.
it's a 30 to 45 day type thing.
Okay,
Just
we'll
what's in
bring
the
it
queue.
up.
It's
Yeah.
not hard, it's just where it fits in their queue.
Yeah.
Meg will update me, and then I'll send out emails, let you guys know, and we'll have an update on it at the next meeting. The next time we all meet, even for the sustainability, there'll be an update, so. Anybody else? I would entertain a motion, I would do these one at a time, okay? Entertain a motion for the $18,450 assessing other professional services for the consultant work increase in assessing contract for FY20.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's carried unanimously from just the FinCom members. Okay. No, sorry. Are you a resident in this town yet?
Give me a couple more weeks.
2 weeks.
Couple more
Couple
weeks.
more weeks.
You heard it here.
First.
Okay. Why don't you give me that copy? You want me to sign that, right?
Hey, Al, you have a card by your feet, if you didn't know that. It's some piece of paper by your foot.
Oh, that's just John Carter's stuff. That's trash.
Oh,
That's trash.
I didn't know it was a filing
Yeah,
system.
that's trash. All right, the next one is a motion for the $17,050, assessing other professional service, updating the town's mapping system, affects the 9/11 system, hasn't been done for 3 years, and it was required because of, I can't read this, Meg, not requested by assessing and budget.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Although any other any other discussion? It's getting late. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you. Oh, that's got a book. Okay. One more. I'll accept a motion for $6,399.35, accounting, other professional services to go on cloud-based version of collection software.
Do you want me to read the rest part? Because my handwriting is atrocious.
When drawn up by the FY20 budget, it did not explain,
IT did not explain.
well, it says it.
Capitalized.
It doesn't say IT, it says it.
It's capital letters.
No, it's not. There's no capital I there. It says it did not explain to us, is that an us?
It did not explain that we were limited on number of users on the MMS system. We ran out of licenses at the end of FY19, and IT suggested...
Says it again. Suggests the cloud as a...
Fix. To our...
That says fix?
That's it. It does.
Oh my God.
Just a quick question, moving to the cloud, is this, how many more?
It would actually, well, it's not only just for the the licenses, because we're keeping it to the number of licensed users, but we also had numerous issues with the server,
Yep.
which kept crashing, so this would also address that aspect of it.
Says it.
Let's move into the cloud, right?
Yeah.
All right, that's the motion.
Again, so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay.
Thank you very much.
One more thing, I'll sign these in a couple minutes, all right? One more thing, very quickly. I did not make copies of this, but I'm going to pass it around real fast and just explain it. There's a MMA breakfast on October 4th. It's for the upcoming legislative calendar. It's in Halifax. It's on a Friday at 8 a.m. I'm going, Meg's going, Beth's going, Kate's going. We've already registered. It was in the email I sent you. Anybody else that wants to go?
I would like to.
Okay.
I can't be there.
Me too.
You want to go?
Anyone else?
Do it.
I'll confirm very shortly.
Okay.
I'll send you the invite.
Pat?
I can't make it on Friday.
Okay. You want to go? Because you'd understand what was going on more about some of these meetings, perhaps. But it's a continental breakfast, and I don't know.
In Halifax.
In Halifax, how much fun can
that's
it?
a draw.
How much fun can it possibly
Yeah,
be?
Al, put me as a go, please.
Okay.
Where is it?
It's at the Halifax Town Hall, in the great room.
Although town hall is closed on Friday, so hopefully they'll let us in.
It's open, is there a possibility of going to a different one, like the Linfield one?
You can go to the Linfield one if you want.
I work in North Andover.
You want me to book you into the Linfield one? I can do that.
I don't know, I mean, it's just possibility. What?
Do you drive 80 miles each way every day?
Not every day, but
I did.
yeah, if you,
It's 75 if you can.
It is 75.
I'll send you this. I'll send you.
I used to go to the Linfield Marketplace, and it's 75 miles door to door.
I'll send you this in the email. If you want the Linfield one, I'll reserve it
Yeah, I
for
mean,
you.
Linfield's only probably 20 minutes away from Andover, 15 minutes.
Sure.
It's 18 longest months of my life.
Alan, do you want me to just record that in the chairman update or just leave it out?
Yeah, just put it in the chairman update.
14 years.
I did it for yeah.
I didn't include it on the agenda simply because it's simply an announcement.
April 1st.
2.5 hours each way.
Uh-huh. Not at 4:30 in the morning.
But I think the only thing that makes this somewhat interesting is it's the legislative update.
Yeah.
Kind of give you an idea. And it talked about Chapter 70 money, and it talked about, you know, it's a dog and pony show, but
Like the last one.
like the last one, yeah. Yeah, it's all right, so Adam, George, Pat, and you can't,
I'm out of town,
and you don't want to, and you let me know, and you want to let me know about...
Send me the email, yeah, send me the-
Well, yeah, take that home with you.
And Beth and
That's
Kate.
it. Consider your email gut. Sorry?
And Beth and Kate are gone.
Beth and Kate, Meg, myself. Any other committee member comments? Hearing none. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good night.